Well, good evening, everyone. It's a privilege to welcome you to Georgetown and to Gaston Hall for this special gathering, and I wish to thank all of you for being here tonight. President Obama has dedicated this week to prescription opioid and heroin epidemic awareness, a time for our nation to, in his words, stand with the courageous individuals in recovery and recognize the importance of raising awareness of this epidemic. In this gathering this evening, we're privileged to have with us leaders from some of the federal agencies in support of this effort, health experts, including a member of our faculty, as well as individuals who are on the front lines of this struggle. In a few moments, we'll also have the opportunity to view a special screening of the film, Chasing the Dragon, The Life of an Opiate Addict. We're especially grateful for the presence of Attorney General Loretta Lynch, who will share her own reflections with us in advance of the film. And I look forward to sharing a few more words about her extraordinary career of public service in just a moment. But I also wish to express my gratitude to FBI Director James Comey and DEA Acting Administrator Chuck Rosenberg, who will be joining us and sharing their thoughts and insights a little later this evening. Dean Patricia Clunan of our School of Nursing and Health Studies, and Dean Edward Montgomery of the McCourt School of Public Policy for their support of this important event. I also wish to offer special thanks to Dean Montgomery for leading our panel's conversation following the film, and to all of our panelists, including Louis Milione, the Deputy Assistant Director at DEA, Peggy Compton, Professor and Associate Dean for Research, Evaluation, and Graduate Programs at our School of Nursing and Health Studies, and two individuals who have been personally impacted by addiction, Lexi Reed Holtom, the Executive Director of the Steve Rumler Hope Foundation, and Gina Woodward. I want to thank all of our guests for sharing their insights and expertise with us so that we might have a deeper understanding and a greater compassion for those who are struggling with this epidemic. Well, it's my privilege to welcome Attorney General Loretta Lynch to our gathering here this evening. Since being sworn in as the 83rd Attorney General of the United States on April 27, 2015, she has worked tirelessly to address the epidemic levels of opioid and heroin abuse and overdose deaths in our country. Her work on this important issue has centered on a belief that successfully engaging with this complex challenge facing our society is about, in her own words, quote, making real and lasting progress on behalf of those in desperate need. It's about confronting a deep and persistent challenge in order to chart a new course for our future and for the future of our country, close quote. So we're deeply grateful for the presence this evening of Attorney General Lynch. It's my pleasure now to welcome to the stage and to share her thoughts and insights regarding this important issue. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Attorney General Loretta Lynch.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that kind introduction on behalf of the university. And thank you so much, President DeGioia, for your leadership of Georgetown University and for recognizing this issue and for lending the support of this outstanding institution to what is really one of the most cutting issues and one of the most important issues of the day. It's fitting that it's here at Georgetown because Georgetown is such an incubator of ideas, of thought, of policy, and you never shy away from the difficult issues. You never really avoid the things that we have to face. Let me acknowledge some people who are here with me tonight to help with this mission and to help support the department's efforts here. I've got some valued colleagues here. You're going to hear from them after the film. Our DEA Administrator, Chuck Rosenberg, our FBI Director, Jim Comey, are here. Both the DEA and the FBI are on the front lines of our fight to end this opioid epidemic, and I want to thank them both for their tireless dedication in combating this epidemic. And they're going to talk to you about some of the more fascinating operational issues that we're confronting. But let me also acknowledge another friend and partner, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia here, Channing Phillips, who's here this evening as well. As someone who's been focused on these issues for a long time. And let me also thank the EOUSA Director Monty Wilkinson and his team at the Executive Office for U.S. Attorneys, because they have provided funding for every U.S. attorney in the country. There are 93 U.S. attorneys in the U.S. They've provided funding for every U.S. attorney's office to also screen Chasing the Dragon in their districts this week as part of Opioid and Heroin Epidemic Awareness Week. And we have also been able to distribute nearly 1,000 copies of this film to our community partners nationwide, which is just an invaluable contribution to this week of awareness and action. Because if you are not able to sit and listen with a family who's lost a loved one to this addiction, or talk to an individual who's been battling this battle firsthand, this film will bring you into that world. And I think you will find that it's a world that you will not be able to look away from once you see it. And let me also thank the many people in this room who have helped to make this week such a success. And let me thank everyone who's here tonight, everyone who came to watch this seminal moment on video. Whether you work in law enforcement or healthcare, whether you are in academia, whether you're on the front lines of drug prevention, or if you are a student interested in learning about this issue, every one of you has an essential role to play in confronting this devastating epidemic, and I want to thank you for being here this evening as well. Now, for those of us who are working in law enforcement, opioid addiction has quickly emerged as an urgent challenge, and it is a challenge of daunting proportions. Earlier this month, the Department of Health and Human Services reported a finding that 3.8 million people ages 12 and up are currently misusing prescription pain relievers in our country. 3.8 million people ages 12 and up. I did not know whether to be more staggered by the number or by the fact that they're starting at 12. Because this is the reality that we confront today, and it's the reality that you're going to hear about in this outstanding film. But this number reflects the fact that the opioid epidemic is indifferent to race, to class, to age, or geography. It cuts across our entire society. It affects young, old, poor, rich, rural communities, some of the hardest hit, as well as our major cities. It's a national problem, and that's why we are crafting a national solution. And that's also why President Obama signed a proclamation declaring this week as Prescription Opioid and Heroin Epidemic Awareness Week. And today, as a part of that effort, I issued a memo to the field, to all the U.S. attorneys who are struggling with this issue as well in their districts, identifying the three main pillars that must be part of our national strategy to combat this epidemic. We have to prevent individuals from succumbing to addiction or opioid overdose deaths. We have to work on prevention. We have to also make sure we have a strong enforcement policy, investigating and prosecuting strategically in order to deter and to punish those who are most responsible for this epidemic, whether they are the leaders of drug trafficking organizations or whether they are the rogue healthcare individuals who divert these opioids. And most importantly, however, we must provide treatment to the people who are grappling with addiction. This is a disease. This is a public health crisis, and treatment must be part of our fight against this scourge: prevention, enforcement, and treatment. And this is a battle that we have to win. We have to. We owe it to our friends, to our neighbors, and to our children. As part of this week's efforts, I was in Lexington, Kentucky yesterday, Lexington and Richmond, Kentucky, an incredibly beautiful part of the country. And I was flying in, looking at literally the blue grass, thinking, you know, it really does almost glow. And driving in, looking at the beautiful horse farms and the scenery. But this is an area, a part of the country, that has been ravaged by this epidemic, literally ravaged. And when I was in Lexington, Kentucky, I had a chance to meet with participants in what we've called the Heroin Education Action Team, or HEAT team. Now, the HEAT team is a partnership between the U.S. Attorney's Office in that district and families, parents, siblings, other family members who have lost loved ones to this epidemic. And I have to tell you, they tell their loved ones stories as part of educating others about this issue to show that it can affect anyone. It can hit anyone. The ages of those who were lost ranged from teenagers to late 30s. Some of them brought photographs of their loved ones to this meeting, and you looked at the pictures of their family members, their children, their siblings, at a time when they were just so full of life, interacting with their families, smiling for the camera, engaged. And then to hear the description of how this disease, whether it was abuse of a prescription drug that led to a descent into heroin or just the prescription drug, took the life and joy away from them and ultimately took their lives. All that promise stolen so soon. But despite the devastation that these families had experienced, they had all chosen to act because they knew that one of the problems that they had faced when they were fighting the fight, trying to save their loved ones, was the thought that they were alone in the fight, not knowing that other families were also struggling with the same issue. How do I get between my child and a pill? How do I get between my loved one and a needle? And when I can intervene and I can get them into treatment, how do I fight that fight? How do I find the place that works for them? What do I say to the insurance company? All of them thought that they were alone. And all of them were also dealing with what happens in our society, which is still the shame and the stigma of dealing with addiction. And as they began to work with the U.S. Attorney's Office, trying to build cases against those who had peddled poison to their loved ones, they realized that they were a community. But they also realized that, in fact, they were part of the larger community of Lexington. And they decided that being silent meant giving in to drug traffickers and to social stigma, and was, in fact, continuing to kill people. So now they're out in the community. They're educating people about the dangers of the epidemic. And one woman in the program literally takes the urn that holds her daughter's ashes with her when she goes and talks to schools. And she said that kids will then see her on the street and they'll say, "There's the woman whose daughter is in a vase because she did drugs." She will do anything to make an impact, to sear that image into their mind so they won't make those choices. And the families are not just going to schools. They're going to police roll calls. One father talked about going to prison to talk to former drug dealers who were about to be released onto the streets, to talk to them about the effects that drugs had had on their families. And he talked so movingly about one of the inmates coming up to him and saying, "You know, I am in here for drug distribution. I sold everything, including heroin. I never thought of my customers as people until now. I never thought of them as anything more than a source of income for me until now." This is what these families are doing. They're doing their part, above and beyond the call of duty, and that's why we have to do ours. And the film that you're about to see is just one of the many ways that the Justice Department is working to spread the word about the real dangers and the unspeakable costs of this epidemic. Chasing the Dragon. It was produced a few months ago by the FBI and the DEA to serve as a conversation starter, to go where these families have been going, to classrooms, to homes, to community centers, to churches. And it makes clear in the most powerful and visceral terms that this epidemic, the opioid epidemic, ruins lives. It destroys families and it weakens communities. And it also shows the ways this epidemic contributes to other crimes like theft and even homicide. And it offers a truly sobering lesson to all of us that prescription drug abuse and addiction can happen to anyone in any community at any time. The stories in Chasing the Dragon are real. Some of the people who appear with the film are with us tonight, and let me also take this opportunity to thank them, both for speaking their truth and for bearing witness on behalf of those whose voices have been stilled by this scourge. And let me ask all of you to speak truth and to bear witness, Help us carry this conversation beyond this room, beyond this week. After tonight, talk about what you've seen with your friends, with your families, with your classmates. Talk about it with your friends and your peers so that they also have the knowledge they need to make the decisions that will keep them safe. Because the only way that we can end this epidemic is by adopting the all-hands approach that brings everyone together: law enforcement, community leaders, medical professionals, and ordinary citizens in a truly united front against this destructive epidemic. And simply by being here tonight, you've already taken a stand. You've already joined us, and I thank you so much for joining us in this fight against heroin and opioid abuse. And let me thank you now for your time, for your commitment. Thank you for caring about people that society wants to throw away, but cannot. Thank you for realizing that they are all of us. Let's keep this going, and we will not stop until we end this scourge, until we save our children, until we guarantee every American the better and brighter future that is their birthright, free from pain, free from addiction, free from this scourge. Thank you so much for letting me spend a few minutes with you tonight, but thank you so much for being here and being part of this conversation. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jim Comey. I'm the director of the FBI.
I'm Chuck Rosenberg. I run the Drug Enforcement Administration.
We're talking to you today because we are facing a crisis that is killing far too many people: prescription drug and heroin abuse.
Each year, more than 46,000 people die from a drug overdose. That's more people than die from car accidents or from gun violence, and half of those 46,000 deaths are related to opioid abuse.
We thought the best approach would be to let you hear the truth. No filter, no censors, just the straight facts from people who have lived with the hard consequences of opioid abuse. You're going to watch unscripted interviews that include some raw emotion and some profanity. You're going to witness real tragedy and learn what happens when drugs take hold of real people and don't let go. You will see that those whose lives are taken over by drug addiction are often kids from stable homes with strong families. Good people who had great childhoods, were given everything they wanted, and had everything going for them. But they took one wrong turn and they were hooked. And once you're hooked, it is so very hard to get off these drugs, and the spiral down is so quick.
After you watch this film, we want you to talk about it. We want you to talk to your parents, to your relatives, to your friends, to your brothers and sisters. If you know somebody who's using drugs or even thinking about using drugs, say something.
You're going to see that once the addiction starts, it is often too late. By telling somebody, you could be saving a life.
I didn't care. I didn't think about it. I just did it. Once we started getting high, it was done.
She was 17 years old, and the only way I knew about it is because she was arrested.
Started smoking pot around 18, and I was always offered prescription drugs, and I never would take them. Then I was in a car accident.
I was running down in the middle of the night to get some water, fell down the stairs, landed on my back on the wooden floor.
It started for me with pot and just progressed into hell, basically.
Weed didn't do it for me, but definitely weed started it all for me.
It was definitely something I didn't see until it was too late. I had no clue what I was getting myself into, so.
Started taking 3 at a time, and then I was taking 4 at a time, and then I started taking like 6 at a time.
When you're getting high, it's not just a drug.
You're hooked. $500 going to
And
dope.
she was a convicted felon at the age of 18.
I had maggots in my leg.
Turned to prostitution, which I've done myself.
Married, mother of 3, and I'm
They're
stripping.
gonna take you to hell and back.
It's not just a little pill.
Takes control of you.
I started using heroin.
The same heroin that just killed me.
You can't go back and say I'm sorry.
It will get you.
Her sister found her.
Died in her sleep.
My daughter, she was dead.
Being addicted to opiates is like chasing a dragon. You're constantly seeking that first high. But what's gonna happen if you actually catch it?
Come from a great family, you know, always had what I wanted. Never had a curfew. I could sleep over at my friend's house whenever. I could have done anything. They would have paid for me to go to any kind of school, stuff like that, and any kind of, they paid for guitar lessons.
I grew up with my dad. My mom wasn't in my life though. He pretty much was mom and dad throughout the whole life. He would tutor me for at least an hour. On the weekends, we'd go out, we'd go camping, we'd go out on the boats. We always had something planned.
She started in gymnastics when she was like a toddler, and she was a cheerleader through middle schools, high schools, and she was also a competitive cheerleader. She started competing probably in 7th grade. She was a very good student. She was in AP classes, AB honor roll.
Worked myself up through the years with minimal college to a position. I worked as a corporate account executive. I was making about an average of $122,000 a year. Things were pretty good financially. We were secure. Kids were happy. We had no real issues.
Dad was military. Mom was Korean. Everyone I grew up with was the same way. Everyone's parents was military and Korean parents, Korean mom. No, I did martial arts, ballet, gymnastics, did all kinds of stuff. I did piano lessons. I was an honor roll student, always went to school. I was like 3.43, grade point average.
I had a great childhood, great family. We did a lot of camping, a lot of fun stuff, going to the beach, camping at the beach. Very active in scouting, Boy Scouts, and something my father, me and him did together. You know, a couple days before my 18th birthday, I actually got my Eagle Scout, which was a big accomplishment for me.
I met my first husband when I was very young. I was 13. And then we got married at 17. So I got to grow up pretty quick. I was 22 years old, and that's when everything started. I got pregnant with my youngest daughter. Once I had her, they gave me Oxycontins. That was the pain medicine. And from then on, that's where my addiction started.
A friend offers you something at a party or at home, or you're having a bad day and you need something to pick you up, so somebody hands you a pill and says, here, this'll help you feel better. That's how this problem always starts.
I was at a concert, and I was 15 at the time, and I was drinking a beer, so I got a possession of alcohol charge. And I got put on probation, so then I couldn't smoke pot anymore. So I started to panic, and then somebody approached me and said, well, here, try this, and it was Oxycontin 80.
So I was hobbling into work, and a young lady that worked there used to be a pharmaceutical sales rep, and she had some samples of things. And she said, Katrina, have you gone to the doctor for this yet? And I said, no. So she said, well, I have these things, take one, not more than that, go home, take one, you know. And I had a habit every night where I'd go home and have a glass of wine. So I went home that night and I took what she gave me, but instead of taking one, I took two because I didn't even know what they were. And took the two, had my glass of wine, and all of a sudden, it just triggered something in my brain, and I would say I became addicted that day.
I think the new friends had a really, really big impact on, you know, when she got to that fork in the road, you go left or you go right, and I think at that point, the friends helped pick the road that she chose. This sounds really appealing. I'm gonna try that. But I guess what most people and most kids don't understand is, you know, when you try something, you're not trying it. It's your new path.
I just like the feeling of certain things being high. It wasn't like I'm depressed, so I'm gonna take this to make me feel better. It was kind of like, I'm feeling good, I'm gonna try this to see if I can feel even more better.
Started taking 3 at a time, and then I was taking 4 at a time, and then I started taking like 6 at a time. And then I went from taking them orally to shooting them. And that was the end.
I went back to the doctor a couple times and got him to refill the medicine to the amount that he couldn't refill it anymore. So then I started buying Oxycontin off the street. From there, Oxycontin started to be more expensive and harder to find. A girlfriend of mine introduced me to heroin. I could get a whole lot more for a whole lot less. And then once I shot up the heroin, that was it from there. My addiction took off, and my daughter was 7 months old when I became physically addicted to heroin intravenously.
I never hesitate to ask them all which drugs they've tried. And they'll typically say, started off with marijuana, tried cocaine, and I've tried oxycodone, and I ask them of all the drugs they've ever tried, what's the most addictive drug? And without a doubt, 100% of the time, they'll say the most addictive drug is oxycodone.
You know, the drugs, you know, feel like it took my mind over and made me do things that I, you know, normally brought up not to do, you know. And it just turned me into a monster.
You know, I just went in my medicine cabinet. My buddy's like, oh, hey, these will get you high. Let's do some. So I was like, okay, you know, you talked me into it right here. I don't have to pay anything, sure. It doesn't even have to be a drug dealer. It could be right in your house. And next thing you know, you're hooked.
My friends in the beginning were the friends that didn't do anything, and then I met the crowd that did do stuff. You are who you hang out with. That is for sure.
These kids go into it as, I'm just going to go to a party and, hey, they're doing this over here. Let me, you know, I want to fit in. Let me do it a little bit. And it's the devil. It gets you. It's, you know, it's that temptation. Hey, this is a fun party over here. It'll suck the life out of you.
All I wanted to do, if it had been in front of my face, is do it. It's not just a little pill, you know. Respect the power of that, you know, of that pill. It's just because it's a prescription, it is every bit as deadly and every bit as addictive.
I worked at a daycare, taking care of other people's kids. I drove the daycare bus. I had to take their children to school. But before I could drive their kids to school, I was in the bathroom of the daycare, crushing up pills, snorting them, so I could go about my day.
The whole time you're sitting there saying you're not a fucking addict, you're not addicted, guess what? You fucking are. Because why are you taking that hit saying, nah, dude, I can quit when I want? You know, you're addicted. People are like, oh, I only smoke weed. I'm not addicted. It's natural. Fucking whatever. Tell yourself whatever. Oh, it's legal now. Oh, fuck off. You know, whatever.
The first time somebody uses an opiate drug, the euphoria that they get is something that they continue to search for and seek for. So while you could do that in the beginning by just chewing on the drug, over time you can't get that high anymore. And so now you have to take it up to the next level. And nobody sets out thinking that they're going to end up being a needle user, but every one of those needle users will tell you that they couldn't get the high anymore doing it the way they were doing.
Heroin became my best friend. Heroin became the love of my life. I put heroin before my family. I put heroin before my children, and I thought that I couldn't do nothing in life anymore without heroin.
There's absolutely no difference between, in my mind, a heroin addict and a pill addict. We both will do anything to get it, break the law, do whatever. You're both addicted. You both go through the withdrawals. You both go, it's the exact same thing.
It's everywhere. It's in your fucking cabinet somewhere. It could be in your grandparents' cabinet. It could be at your friend's mom's cabinet. It fucking could be anywhere. That's pills. But, well, shit, heroin could be in a drawer somewhere. Who knows? It's all the same shit. One's just prescribed to you and one you fucking go cop on the street.
There's no way to say no with the opiates. It's hard. Real hard. I can tell myself no, 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 but my body, as soon as you think about it, you get anxiety, your palms start to sweat. You know, your mental ignores your physical part of it.
I am very angry. And one of the things I'm most angry about, and I tell her all the time, is that that drug was so much more important to you than me. And I'm the one that can help you. I'm the one that helps you. I'm the one that supports you. I'm the one that'll always be there for you. You need something, I'm going to be the one to take care of it for you. But something that literally destroyed everything good within you was so much more appealing. Wanted that so much more than anything I could offer her. And I'm angry. I am angry about that.
The progression of addiction and the behavior that comes with it is pretty standard, regardless of where you're born, how much money you have, how old you are, what your race is, what your nationality is. You can be the smartest person in the world. The minute that chemical hits your bloodstream, you lose control of what it does in your body. You can't control it. Nobody can control it. I don't care who you are. It's not controllable.
I lived in crack houses, and it's almost like something you see on TV, an abandoned building with drug paraphernalia everywhere. It might be a piss-stained mattress, and God knows what else is on it. There was actually a place in the city that we were at, and a lady had overdosed in the bathtub. She had died, but she was still in the bathtub. We'll just find another room in the house, and that's what my day consisted of. It became my full-time job. The needle was my boss, a very demanding boss.
Your whole day revolves around it. You go to sleep doing it, you wake up doing it. You know what I mean? It's like some people smoke after every meal they have. No, you're doing a fucking shot.
It's a never-ending vicious cycle. It's the same thing over and over and over. You wake up, all you want to do is find out how you're going to get something, how you're going to get it.
You know, it's kind of stupid if you think about it, because I'm wasting all this money stealing from my family and my friends just to do a drug and fall asleep, you know? And then I wake up sick, so I'm like, crap, now I gotta do it all over again, you know? You're still chasing that first high. So, you know, in order to be high, you gotta at least be normal. And to get there, you gotta at least do enough to where you're not sick anymore, so.
Well, usually, like, if I had stuff the day before, I'd always save a bag for the morning time, so when I wake up, I could get well. And I call it that because in the end, I wasn't using to get high anymore. I was using to stay well, so I wasn't sick. You know, I'm not even getting high. I'm just trying to, you know, be able to get up out of bed. You know, my head was always on my lap, you know. I feel like I missed a couple years of my life because there's a lot that, you know, it's just a fog, black fog, because, you know, I really wasn't there, you know.
My addiction level was so bad that I couldn't even function without 40 pills a day. I was ill, like literally every 4 hours, the chills started setting in. And I would wake up and I woke up sick. And that's the way it went all day long.
How do you know you're an addict? It's when you're doing something that you know is not good for you, that's harming you, but you can't help yourself. When your relationships are starting to fall apart around you, and you don't care, and the only thing that's on your mind is about how to get the substance and how to get to the next high, you're an addict. You can't maintain an opiate addiction and a normal life for very long.
I felt like after my first year of using it, I actually got physically addicted to where I actually needed it to wake up and get out of bed, start moving around, take a shower. And that's when I started, stealing from my family, friends. Whatever money I had in my pocket was all going to it. If I got a $500 paycheck, $500 going to dope.
Because you always tell yourself, whenever you're using drugs, and especially it's like a super addictive one, I'm not addicted. Motherfucker, you're addicted. You know what I mean? Like, you're fucking addicted. You're in denial. You might not be addicted at that point in time, but you're gonna keep fucking using, and a month later or 2 months later, you're fucking addicted.
At one point, my husband said he would stop putting gas in the van so I could drive the distance to the city to get my drugs. And I said, well, I'll show you. I'm going to move to the city. So I don't need my van and I don't need gas money because the dope dealers are going to be living right here with me. And that's what I did. I ran away from home.
You will be high and put yourself in situations that you will get hurt. Someone will take advantage of you. You'll be knocked out, it's gonna happen. You're gonna get hurt.
Some people who have money and they don't have to steal for it. And then you meet other people who, just pawn their family's TV and is coming to get high and then deal with the consequences later.
She stole checks from her grandmother and signed them. She stole my debit card. If it wasn't nailed down, it was in the pawn shop. She spent $800 a week. My daughter, who had, everything handed to her, could have gone anywhere in the world, very book smart, very motivated, worked at a strip club. My little girl degraded herself just to get that.
Women turn to prostitution, which I've done myself. Guys will steal. They'll rob you right in front of you. I've seen guys take guns out on dealers and steal and rob everything from them, not even worrying about if they get shot or end up in jail.
People get fucking raped. People get killed over stupid shit. It's people now I can say it's just a drug. But like when you're getting high, it's not just a drug. It's some fucking shit.
Best thing that can happen to someone who's addicted to oxycodone is that they can be arrested. That's the best thing. The best thing that they can be arrested and go to jail. Everything other than that is worse. It's going to end in a bad way.
You're gonna get caught eventually, so I just didn't think it was gonna be me. I would just think, they must have screwed over the wrong person, they got caught because they weren't careful enough.
She was pulled over. I searched the car, and she had a quantity of pills. At that point, she was smoking them, so there was some type of a pipe device in them, so she was arrested, and she was a convicted felon at the age of 18.
I have 4 kids. My youngest son will be 1 this month. I've been locked up for freaking 8 months. First time I came to jail, the first time I got locked up this year, he was 2 weeks old. Don't even know my kid. My other 3 are in foster care right now. I never thought any of this would ever happen to me. The only thing I care about is my kids. Like, my kids are suffering. It's not me. I give two shits if I'm suffering. Yeah, it sucks. But it's like, my kids, they didn't do anything in this. My parents, they gotta come visit me through, I don't even get through a fucking window. I get through a fucking camera. Like a little camcorder. That sucks.
It's not worth it. Losing your freedom sucks. You have somebody tell you when to get up, when to shower, when you eat, what you eat. and you have to worry about the other people that are in here and that are in here for, you know, life, and they don't care about you.
I was supposed to go to court November 2011, and the judge was supposed to let me go. He gave me the maximum, which ended up being 23 months, 2 years instead of the 10 months. And at the time, I was so angry. In retrospect, I'm very thankful because I would have, I know for 100% certainty, I would have gone right back out and done it again.
I got kicked out of my house, and I met your neighborhood-friendly drug dealers who were like, oh, you can crash on this couch. And they, you know, of course, they'd give me stuff here and there, but it wasn't ever enough for me to even enjoy it, so that made me run fake prescriptions.
You don't think about anything. You don't think about anybody you're hurting. You don't think about before and after. You don't think fucking 7 fucking dudes in all black are fucking running up in your fucking house. FBI! You don't think you're gonna be on the fucking news. You don't fucking think anything. You don't think any of that shit.
Every generation seems to have their drug of choice. Unfortunately, this generation seems to have found prescription opiates as that drug of choice. And even more unfortunately, the consequences of those drugs are far more devastating than anything else we've seen in the past. Chemically and physiologically speaking, there's very little difference between oxycodone, morphine, and heroin. It's just that one comes in a prescription bottle and another one comes in a plastic bag.
In the beginning, I would always try and get pills because you know what you're getting, you know? You know it's always going to be the same thing. And then eventually that just got too expensive, you know? So then you'd go for heroin because it's cheaper, but you take that risk of getting really good stuff and overdosing, or getting fake stuff, or just stuff that isn't good enough to even get you well.
A lot of my friends were trying heroin, you know, to get the same high from the Oxycontin, and it was cheaper, and so of course I got into it, and it just grabbed me, you know.
I can tell you this, that I think she was able to access heroin, more heroin, easily than the pills. When she was using one or using the other, she was the same horrible, difficult person.
I always said that I would never touch heroin ever in my life, and it was prescription drugs that led me to try heroin. Prescription drugs are the same thing. It's an opiate. You can get 4 shots for the price of 1 pill, and it's a dirty drug, because you never know what you're gonna get. People can cut it with something that can kill you, you know? That's how most people overdose, is that it's cut with something bad.
The doctor asked me, he said, where are you getting your heroin from? Where, you know, and I said, I'll never tell you who I'm getting it from. He said, I don't want to know from who. He said, I want to know from where. And he said, well, let me tell you what you're shooting up. He said, you're shooting scrambled heroin, and they are using meat tenderizer as a cutting agent. It's not like, you know, a bag of heroin comes with ingredients on the back. And of course you trust your drug dealer that he's going to just, you know, keep you coming back to him, but he claims he didn't know either. That's how he got it. But yeah, so it eats everything away underneath.
In here, fucking, they shoot a meat fucking tenderizer, and they have like big blue black marks. I'm like, what the fuck is that? I'm like, oh, that's meat tenderizer. You've got a few of them. What do you mean? You didn't learn? You don't know. You don't learn because you're trying to get high. It doesn't matter.
A lot of my friends have had abscesses. They might get a staph infection, which turns into MRSA, or, you know, Hep C. And, you know, if that's your only needle, that's your only needle, so you're going to use it again.
At one point, I had an abscess in my leg that was so bad. I had staph infection. My leg was like 4 times its normal size. When the doctors cut my leg open to clean it out, I had maggots in my leg. They were eating the rot, the infection. That wasn't enough for me to quit. As I was admitted to the hospital, they gave me a PICC line, which is an IV line. I had the dope dealer come into the hospital and shooting heroin into my IV line. I have contracted hepatitis C from sharing needles with people that I don't know who. I shot up toilet water because I didn't want to spend any money to go buy a bottle of water. So we would stop at public restrooms and use toilet water to mix with it to shoot it up. Rainwater on the side of the road, and you'd suck it up in the needle and shoot our dope. I didn't care what it was going to do to me later on, just I wanted the feeling of it right then and there.
Withdrawal for the individuals that are taking the heroin that's available now looks like extraordinary physical, muscular pain. And very few people can actually manage it.
Like, you know how when your whole body hurts when you have the flu? And like, just, it's like 15 times worse than that. Opiates, you're getting sick. I don't know who the fuck you think you are if you think you're fucking stronger than some fucking dope, because you're not. You know what I mean? Your body's gonna give in, your mind's gonna give in, your fucking judgment's gonna give in, you're gonna fucking bow. And that's just the fucking way it is. That's the fucking way it is. That fucking withdrawal is a bitch.
You feel like you just want to die when you're going through that. At that point, you're willing to do anything to get that next high so you can just feel normal.
I mean, I remember her in her room crying and just busting her room up, screaming to me, just get me a little. Just get me a little so I can stop. No.
Feels like your skin's crawling and you can't sit still and you'll do anything to make it stop.
You can't move. You constantly sneeze. Your fucking whole body fucking aches. It fucking hurts. Fucking people are crapping on themselves. People are puking on themselves. People are doing both at the same time. You would probably rather be dead than have to actually go through a withdrawal.
It was horrific. I was sitting on the toilet, diarrhea, vomiting on the floor, so weak I couldn't even move. I just lay there like, I don't want to eat, drink, nothing.
It's just something that I never ever want to experience again. It is the worst feeling ever. And I wouldn't wish that feeling upon my worst enemy. That's how bad it is.
Every day I come to work knowing that somebody died. And more times than not, we have at least one prescription drug or other substance abuse case. Your friends, your family will find you dead, and then what happens? And then that is the image that they get stuck with for the rest of their lives.
I've lost several friends to heroin and prescription pill overdose.
I know 2 people on a personal level that had died from it.
You know, one time my friend, she got out of here, she fucking got high. She wasn't even out 6 days. She was dead.
One of my friends, she took her normal dose and OD'd. Her sister found her with a needle in her arm in her room, which was not good.
The day that I overdosed, I was having a hard time finding a vein, and a girlfriend of mine said, well, just go in your neck. You have your jugular vein. And I said, okay. It didn't let me push all the heroin in, and instantly it killed me. When the ambulance got there, they gave me a shot of Narcan, and I was non-responsive to the Narcan, which is adrenaline, and that's to, jumpstart your heart. And it didn't work. So they had to use the defibrillator, and that's where they shock your heart back. They got a pulse. They got me to the hospital, and I was still kind of in and out of it. But when I came to, I unhooked the IV from the pole and unhooked all these little things they had on me, and I went and walked right out and got in my van, and I showed up to the dope dealer with the gown on, these things stuck all over me, the IV in my arm, and he sold me heroin, the same heroin that just killed me. I utilized the IV a couple times before I turned it back in. I have nowhere really to shoot, so that was a freebie.
So everything came to a head. I was writing the prescriptions and full on with my addiction. And I ended up getting caught and going to jail. And while I was in jail, my daughter got involved with some friends. From what I understand, her friends were all doing prescription pills. I had no idea. I didn't even know it was a problem. I just thought it was my problem. And she said, "Mom, you don't have any right to talk. Look at you. Look where you are." I said, "But Kirsten, you saw where it put me. I can't imagine you would do the very same thing that I did." I was like, how? You know, it just didn't make sense.
I would go to the doctor's office every time with her. I told her I'd go in for her, and usually it works because she'll go in for me and ask for my prescriptions and they give it to her. And so I went in there and I asked, and next thing you know, she got arrested, and then she called me saying that I had a warrant for me. I said, "Why would you make me go in and do that? Like, to your own daughter, knowing that she can get caught and get in trouble." And she said that she was sorry because that she didn't realize how bad her addiction was.
You need help, Kirsten.
When I talked to her, she didn't even say goodbye. She must have nodded off the phone because I heard like and that was it. It was Saturday afternoon. I was in the jail and they came down and told me they needed to see me. And I went up and because her father and I were both arrested for the same thing, we were both there, so I saw him coming. And the detectives came and told us that she, what had happened. The parent overdose, and that she was, initially they said she'd passed, and then they said she was in ICU, struggling for life. And they wanted me to, talk to the doctor, and the doctor recommended I disconnect all life support, and I refused. And then they had 7 resuscitation efforts, I guess, and eventually, that morning she passed away. At her funeral, most all the kids were high. Death is real. And I will say, because I remember being that teenager too, so I know it's like they're gonna mock it, but it's real. And I think I'm still in shock. Like it is hard. I don't even know how to put it into words. Maybe that's why I'm able to deal with it, because it's so mind-numbing that someone you love that much. She was my first love. Someone you love that much, you can lose like that, and you can't go back and say I'm sorry or set a better example or talk them out of it, and I know she didn't want to go. I know that's not what she wanted. I know that she had, all these things that she wanted to do, and I know that as they resuscitated her through the night, that was her way of clinging to life, But it was too much.
I love my children more than anything in the world. I will walk through fire for them. And I know a lot of parents feel that way. But you can't feel that way. You have to understand what you're dealing with is not your child. I put my own child in jail to stop her from this. And that's not an easy decision to make. It's not a fun decision. Nobody wants to know that their little girl's sitting in jail. But she was 7 months clean, eating healthy, getting her rest, no drugs. My son, my nephew, my mother, and I went to get her. And she came out and she was healthy. Everything was great. Everything was great. There were no problems, no fighting, no talking about, Mom, I'm feeling funny, I need to go to a meeting. Nothing. Everything was just that little girl at 16 before all this stuff started. That's who she was. And then just, she asked to go to the store to get a pack of cigarettes. And she came home, said, oh, you know, Mom, I'm sorry I was late. You know, they didn't have my cigarettes. I had to go to another gas station. Okay, you know, and things fine. So I'm cooking dinner, and I'm like, you want to help me cook? She's like, no, I don't want to help you cook. You know, so I'm going to go in my room and watch TV. You know, and she was so bubbly, you know, like nothing. Nothing was wrong. And she went upstairs, and it was maybe 40 minutes. I was cooking dinner. Dinner was done. And I'm hollering for the kids. My son and nephew come down, and Sierra doesn't come down. I think she fell asleep or something. So I go upstairs and knocking and knocking and knocking on the doors, no answer. I open that door, and my little girl is on the floor dead. And I remember when I pushed on her chest, I heard that last breath. I heard the... I was in my kitchen cooking dinner, and that happened 17 steps up, and I had no idea that when she left this house, that was going to happen. And I spend my Sundays looking at a gray headstone in a patch of grass. I will be spending my Christmases there, her birthdays there, all my holidays, because she took that wrong turn.
My girlfriend Sierra, you know, she passed away a year ago this month, and from heroin, and you know that's a constant big reminder in my head that you know if I even pick this stuff up once, it's gonna kill me, you know, and there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about her, and you know, not a morning that I wake up I don't wish that she was laying beside me, you know. She was my best friend. We went to high school together. Sorry. I met her in high school. I'm sorry. I just miss her a lot. I wish she was still here with me.
Sierra came home on February 12th. Sierra died February 18th. And she got out. It's still calling her. It's still calling her. It's that powerful that you could spend 7 months clean, and being educated on nothing but how to beat it, how bad it is for you, you know, all this. And you last 6 days.
The spiral down is so fast, you know, it doesn't take much. And I lost everything. I lost my daughter, first and foremost, but I lost pictures, every material possession I had. I had never been in trouble in my life. I'm now a felon at 41 years old. So all that work I did, you know, all those dreams I had, you know, it's like I'm starting over again with a huge weight on my shoulders, you know, all for a pill.
My dad doesn't even trust me anymore, which is hard because my dad's always trusted me my whole life. I've never had my dad look at me with disappointment before I did this. I'm a criminal, I'm an addict. That's how everybody will always perceive me. Listen to what they say no. Just say no. You're not uncool for saying no. You're more cool for saying no, I think. I wish I could have said no. If I could go back and do it all over, I would definitely go back and say no.
I didn't feel like I was physically hooked, but that's because I never gave it a chance to stop, you know, and I didn't really learn how to enjoy life without drugs. As much as I wanted to quit, I was too scared to ask for help. I don't want to freak my parents out by telling them I'm hooked on some hardcore drug. It didn't kill me like everyone told me.
It's not worth it, and it will get you. You're no different than anybody else. It will destroy your life. You will end up in a jail, you'll end up dead, or you'll be in some crazy institution for the rest of your life. And that's serious, and that's for real. And it took me coming to jail and being incarcerated, and it took me missing my mom's funeral, missing my children grow up. It's taken all of this, because nobody in their right mind would turn their back on their dying mom for a drug. I want to be that loving and caring mom that my mom was to me, to my girls. I don't want them to hate me, to resent me. I don't want them to be embarrassed by me anymore.
If you want to fail the rest of your life, if you want to be in and out of jail, if you want to possibly lose everything that fucking matters to you, go ahead and go get high. Go ahead. If you want to be happy, you want to freaking get married, like every good part of my life, I wasn't getting high. You know, every good part of my life, I was getting high. And any drug addict will tell you that. If you want to be a flunky, go ahead and get high. Go ahead and do it. But, I've been there, done that, and I wouldn't recommend it.
Sierra did not take life for granted until she started using. It is much stronger than you, and it will win. It will win. Because this doesn't just affect you. It affects everybody in your family for the rest of their lives. That we're the ones stuck here, missing you. And there's help out there. You gotta take it. Don't think you can do it alone, because you can't. And your parents aren't the enemy. They just want the best for you.
It's something I want to deal with for the rest of my life. You know, to be honest, I relapsed about a month ago, and used for about a month, and I have a week. I had a week clean on Wednesday, and you know, that's something that just shows how powerful this disease is. For me to lose somebody a year ago, not even a year ago, but I'm already using it. That's how powerful this stuff is. And, I'm just gonna try my best to stick with it, because I know it will kill me. And you know, just something I gotta work at every day. It'll take you to hell and back, and if you're lucky, you know, you'll make it back. You know, it's just not worth it at all. You know, if I could go back, and if I knew what I knew now about this, and if I could go back, I would do it all different. Starting with that first pill, I wouldn't touch it.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Chuck Rosenberg, Acting Administrator, Drug Enforcement Agency.
Forgot I was supposed to speak. For coming. I'm awfully glad that you took part of your day, part of your evening, to watch this. This is important stuff, and I want to tell you why. I want to do it relatively briefly, and I'd like to do it in a way that helps you remember some of what you have seen and will hear later tonight. I think there are certain words in our lexicon that are vastly overused. Historic, unprecedented, unique, epidemic. This is an epidemic. That word is not overused here. That is precisely what this is. Sometimes when I use numbers, I feel people only hear blah, 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 big number, blah, 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 big number. But here are some big numbers. And I'm going to try and put them in context for you. If you're like me, and I wasn't very good at math, big numbers tend to go in one ear and out the other, but bear with me for a minute. We'll lose about 47,000 people this year to a drug overdose. 47,000 people will die. I tried to put that in a context that might be helpful. Georgetown undergrads number about 1,800, give or take. That would be like 25 years worth of graduates of this institution vanishing from the planet like that. Imagine 25 years of the last classes of Georgetown undergrads simply disappearing. That's about 47,000. Please don't check my math, but it's close. We are 5% of the world's population as Americans, and we consume 99% of the world's hydrocodone. Think about those two numbers for a minute. 5% of the world's population, 99% of the world's hydrocodone. Also stunning. And we know that the path from abusing pills, most of which are obtained, at least initially, legitimately, to using and abusing heroin is not just correlative, but causative. We have about 580 new heroin users every single day in the United States. 4 out of 5 of them started on pills, and most of them got it out of a medicine cabinet of a parent or from a loved one or a friend. They got someone who got it legitimately, who gave it to someone that they loved, perhaps knowingly or unknowingly, who became a heroin user, who became part of that awful statistic, 47,000 a year. This stuff is really, really important, and I'm awfully glad that we're talking about it. We're trying to think about this at the DEA in several ways. Ever since I was a brand new baby prosecutor, I knew I wasn't going to enforce or jail or prosecute our way out of this mess. Part of this has to be demand reduction, and part of that involves all of you. So take this, show it to someone you love, have that conversation. Don't just leave here tonight and do nothing. This is an epidemic, and we are losing way too many people to it. My privilege to introduce somebody who I consider not just a friend, but a mentor, a former colleague, probably the best and smartest public servant I have met in my entire life. Also my friend, Jim Comey, the director of the FBI.
So thank you for that, Chuck. The only part of the film that isn't wonderful is the part we're in at the beginning. But we are in this because this is affecting and shaping and changing our country. People often ask me, so why is the FBI, which doesn't have a drug mission at its center as the DEA does, why is the FBI doing stuff like this? Why is the FBI director standing here? And I'll tell you there's a few reasons. The first is because we are part of this country and every community in this country. There are almost 500 FBI offices around the country. We are everywhere, and we see the pain and the toll of this everywhere. And so as people who care about children and neighbors and friends and relatives, we want to help. But it also aligns with our professional responsibilities because we see the echoes of this in all the rest of our work. We see its echoes in our sex trafficking work. We see its echoes in our cyber extortion and sextortion work. We see its echoes in our fraud work, our money laundering work, our gangs work. We see it affecting all of America. And so that's why we have joined up with our partners at the DEA to try and make a difference. To try and make a difference in a couple different ways. We arrest people. We try to disrupt the distributors, the gangs, the cartels, the corrupt docs who are driving this. But we recognize you can't arrest your way out of any kind of problem, and so we want to be part of the solution, as Chuck said, by raising awareness and hoping to steer good people away from something that will swallow their lives. And a word about good people. There are people in this auditorium, people who participated in this film, who have suffered grievous loss, who have lost some of the most important, immeasurable things in their lives. I don't know why bad things happen to good people. I've struggled with it my entire life. Facile explanations to me about such and such being God's will, or this explanation, that explanation doesn't make any sense to me. I struggle to understand why. But here's what I believe to my core, that no matter why that bad thing happened to a good family, to a good child, to a good spouse, our obligation is to not let evil hold the field, to make sure something good comes from that loss, not to make it worth it, it'll never be worth it, but simply because that's our obligation to go on and to ensure that evil is fought. Thank you to the moms and dads, to the brothers and sisters who are here and who have the courage to make something good come from indescribable loss. You are making an enormous difference. And the last thing I'll say is part of making a difference is what these moms and dads and brothers and sisters and loved ones have done, and that is insist upon having the conversation. One of the things we find in our work is that good people have a tendency to write an innocent narrative over troubling facts. Not just in the counterterrorism world where people have a tendency to say, well, I must have misunderstood what that guy was up to, but in this world involving this epidemic, people have a tendency to say, well, I must be misunderstanding. He must be just having a bad day. Or she must be having a job performance problem. It must be related to something that I can't see. And so they write a narrative over troubling facts. And what we need them to do, what the people who are here making good come from incredible loss need them to do, is have that conversation. Let this be the spur to let you take a step forward, and instead of writing a narrative over difficult facts, ask what is going on, and do you have a problem that I can help you with, or find someone to get you help? Because watching films is a good thing, but if we let this change the way we interact with other people, that will be a far better thing. So thank you for making good come from this loss. We are honored to be part of it. We'll do our absolute best to help in every way that we can. Okay, thank you.
And I'm Ed Montgomery. I'm the Dean of the McCourt School of Public Policy here at Georgetown. Before we open it up to questions from the audience, I just wanted to echo Director Comey and Attorney General Lynch's recognition of the families who are in the movie, who shared their stories with us today. Could we give them a round of applause and thank them for sharing their stories? So I think there's a microphone that people are encouraged to line up with, and if you have questions, we'll have some time to talk to the administrator and the FBI director. So feel free, don't be shy. You have somebody?
Hi, good evening. Thank you. I just was curious, with the 99% of consumption in the U.S., demand reduction is clearly important, but why isn't supply reduction? If we know that this drug causes a chemical, hit in people's heads, why are we even legally distributing it?
Well, it's a very good question. We think about this in a number of dimensions. Demand reduction, of course, educating folks about the danger. But we also do supply reduction, and that takes different forms as well. Part of supply reduction is enforcement. Enforcement operations to get, as Director Comey said, bad doctors or bad actors off the street. The CDC recently put out, I think, very good and important guidelines to try to help prescribers understand their role in this process. And by the way, most prescribers are good, caring, honest docs. They want the best for their patients. But we have an overprescription problem, and so educating doctors, but also involving folks who do rehab and treatment, working communities, whether it's faith-based organizations, all of that is part of a whole. We call it our 360 strategy. So it's demand reduction, supply reduction, enforcement, all of its pieces.
Why are we even legitimately prescribing it at all?
Well, hydrocodone and oxycodone are Schedule II medicines. They also do great good for people when used in the right way, in the right amounts. And so the trick, I think, is figuring out what the right way and the right amounts are. We're clearly out of alignment right now. We need to get back into alignment.
Thank you all for coming down to talk to us. So I was just wondering how we can help the people that have already been addicted to these drugs. I mean, we saw in the video that a lot of the people that went to jail, they said that's the best thing that can happen to these people. But even at jail and then out of jail, they are continuing to be addicted. So I was just wondering what we can do to help. Thank you.
Well, I also hope you'll ask that question to the panel that will be up here next, because in some ways, not only is it a stellar panel, but they are better situated to answer that question. We have to spend more money in this country, I believe, on treatment and rehab. We have to have more facilities available. The DEA, there's a bit of a myth about the DEA. We're not prosecuting users. My sense of it, my strong sense is that at that level, it's a public health issue and not a law enforcement issue. And if we care about that user population and we want to help them, then we have to put our money where our mouth is. I think we have to do a lot more in terms of rehab and treatment.
So I think one of the really powerful parts about the movie was that it showed a lot of empathy for the people implicated in it, which is, I think, like a little bit of different approach from the war on drugs in the 80s and 90s, which took a far more like punitive approach to it. So what has changed since then? Why has that change happened? And how do you avoid like law enforcement becoming the core of drug policy?
Yeah, I think the best answer is to echo something Chuck just said. He and I were prosecutors during the 80s and 90s, and I did a lot of drug work. And as a drug prosecutor, I felt certain that we had to try and interdict the supply. That has to be part of it. But I felt great frustration, I know you did too. We felt sometimes though like all we were doing was bailing a boat, locking up drug dealers, and that reducing the demand has to be part of it. And so I think what you're seeing today is 25, 30 years of wisdom from more and more people realizing you cannot arrest your way out of the problem. We have to lock up the dealers. We have to lock up those who are bringing it in from Mexico, have to lock up the bad docs, but we are going to do that forever if we don't deal with the other side. Fix the hole in the boat while we're bailing it is the answer to the problem. I don't know whether you have a different reaction.
No, I agree.
Yeah. So I think it's just I think I get smarter the older I get. I think we, as all people, get smarter the more experience we have.
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much for being here with us tonight. My question is specifically regarding the DEA's recent decision to schedule kratom to become an illegal drug at the end of this month. And for those in the audience who are not aware, kratom is an herb that is found in Southeast Asia and has been used by the peoples in this region for hundreds and thousands of years as a natural pain reliever with very few harmful effects. And more recently, kratom has also become a a drug that has been used by people facing opiate and heroin and fentanyl addictions, and it really helps them to cope with the negative, with their withdrawal symptoms, and to effectively wean themselves off of these very harmful substances. However, earlier this month, the DEA announced that they would be scheduling kratom as a Schedule I drug effective September 30th, about a week from now. And so I'm kind of wondering what prompted the DEA to make this decision, and not only are they scheduling it, but they're also making it a Schedule I drug, which will make it very difficult to continue to perform research to see if kratom is an effective opiate reliever. And Schedule I is really it's for drugs that are believed to have no medicinal value and high addiction potential. So I was wondering if you could explain that decision in a little more detail.
Absolutely, I'm glad to, and thank you for raising it. So kratom, as you know, is an opioid in its classification, so this is a good place to talk about it. The FDA has ruled, after its considered judgment, that there is no medical value. We are bound by its scientific determinations in that arena. It's in Schedule I, therefore, because it has no medical value, there is a high potential for abuse. And most importantly, we're now getting data from folks around the country that people are dying from kratom overdoses. So if we made an error, and perhaps some people think we did, I frankly do not, then we erred on the side of protecting the public, and I'm okay with that.
Just one quick clarification on that. Kratom has about 15 reported deaths. Most of those deaths involved other illegal drugs as well.
Okay.
And just for comparison, Tylenol has about 1,500 deaths in the last 15 years.
Thank you for the clarification.
We get some of the other people. I know we have a long line of folks. We want to make sure we get through the whole crowd. Thank you.
So, thank you both for being here tonight. My question is, in international law enforcement, there's a big narrative about reaching out to global partners to learn from their tactics about how we can combat a wide variety of law enforcement issues. So what projects, what programs, if any, do the DEA and the FBI have to reach out to the global community and learn from them about how to combat this problem?
I think we can both provide a piece of that answer. And we do, like the FBI, a lot of work overseas. We do a lot of international training, a lot of joint training. We learn from our partners abroad just as they learn from us. I want to make sure I'm getting to the heart of your question, though. You're probably thinking beyond training, I imagine.
Yes.
So help me with that a bit, if you don't mind.
Just any international enforcement tactics, but also training, if you could speak to that, that's fine.
With respect to this epidemic, you mean?
Yes.
The challenge is we're leading the world in this. And so I don't know of a useful model for how to grapple with this epidemic. Because maybe you do, but I don't know of anything that's comparable.
It's interesting, as I talk to our partners around the world, I was just in Detroit speaking at a northern border conference. The Canadians are just now beginning to see, shouldn't say just now, but are seeing a spike in heroin and fentanyl related deaths. And as Jim said, we have much to share because we have suffered so much. We can learn from our partners, we do, but right now we are sort of sadly, the world's expert on this epidemic.
Thank you.
First off, thank you for coming tonight. The man a few spaces in front of me asked like half of my question, but with regards to like how in the film it was described that prison could be the best thing that could happen to you while using drugs. And then I was kind of heartened to hear that you're kind of changing your approach to targeting more the traffickers and less the users. Are there any like concrete plans in place or in the works to really target more like the source? Because I feel like, and also like to develop alternatives for abusers to like be removed from society and removed from access to these drugs, but also not having to live with the social stigma of like being a felon or a convicted felon, because I feel like that has negative effects as well. And the incarceration rate in this country is pretty anomalous in the free world. So are there any plans in place to kind of change the approach to that?
Well, let me just quibble with one
part of your question. I don't actually think we've changed our tactics or changed our strategy. The DEA and the FBI, when you look at the whole of law enforcement, are relatively small pieces. There are 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the United States. We represent 2 of them. And so, frankly, we never had the inclination, the time, or the resources to target users. We don't. And I'm stealing Director Comey's formulation because I like it so much. At least I think you said this originally. But our sweet spot is that unholy alliance between drug cartels, primarily out of Mexico, and violent street gangs. That's where we work. That's the space in which we work. And so I don't think we've changed a thing. We're relatively small. We only have about 4,500 special agents. And so, as I said, neither the time nor the inclination to prosecute users. It doesn't make sense from a resource standpoint. I don't know if you have a...
No, and so it's been our focus to try and interdict the major supply, but where the country has journeyed, as I said in response to the earlier question, I think the country's gotten much smarter at all levels of law enforcement and public health and medicine and public policy in thinking differently about addiction and what the best way is to deal with crimes related to addiction and addiction itself. And so, look, there's no doubt that it's true for lots of addicts that your turning point comes when you hit bottom, and bottom is often in a jail cell. But I think where we are in a country 30 years after the war on drugs is we realize that that can't be the rule that we apply, and that we have to bring lots of other approaches trying to deal with addiction and addiction-related crime. But our focus is trying to stop. One of the things we're trying to do, which sounds odd, we're trying to raise the price, particularly of heroin in this country, by interdicting supply so that it'll be harder to get hold of, less easy for people to make a transition to using fentanyl-laced heroin.
Thank you.
Thank you. This question has to do with sort of the accountability of pharmaceutical companies that, in many ways benefited from the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Americans. And obviously this may be a better question for Loretta Lynch, but I think, has there been any repercussion for senior level pharmaceutical executives for very much being aware of the, enormous profit that these companies were able to take home at the expense of the deaths of Americans? I'm curious, talking about the supply and many of these companies continuing that supply, has there been any sort of, repercussion for those individuals that were very much aware of what was happening?
It's a hard question for a couple of reasons, and I may not be the best person, but I'm sitting here, so what the heck? They make a lawful product. I'm not here to defend them. I'm also not here to denigrate them. But they make a lawful product. We have a large part of DEA. In fact, I hope you'll stay for the panel because the head of our Office of Diversion Control is on it, and he's brilliant, and he's thoughtful, and he'd be the perfect person to ask this question of. I think I just ended a sentence with a preposition.
At Georgetown.
At Georgetown, no less.
At Georgetown, we have many
I realized as I was going down that path that it was going to end in a preposition, and I'm chagrined. Nevertheless, they make a lawful product. And so I think from our standpoint, both as law enforcers and regulators, we need to make sure that the leakages in the system, the pill mills, the pharmacies that are not maintaining inventory control, the doctors who are willy-nilly writing prescriptions to people who are traveling 400 miles from their home to the pharmacy to get that prescription filled. That's where we focus our efforts, and I think we do a pretty good job, frankly. But it's a lawful product, and so we're going to get caught in that loop, right, of what do we do as citizens about pills that can both help and hurt. And as regulators, as enforcers, we have to just make sure that things stay in the legitimate stream of commerce and that the bad actors are weeded out and prosecuted and put in jail. But it's an excellent question. Our head of our diversion control office, Lou Milioni, will be up here next. I think you should also ask him that.
Thank you.
No sentences ending in prepositions on the panel either. That's something up with which we will not put.
Yes.
I don't think we can top that, but if you wanted to offer the...
I just want to point out that he had plenty of time to come up with that while I was struggling with my sentence.
Would you join me in thanking Director Comey and Minister Rosenberg for this conversation, and we'll bring the panel up now. Thank you very much. So our panel includes Deputy Assistant Administrator of DEA, Louis Maloney. We have Lexi Reed Holtum, who's the Executive Director of the Steve Rumier Foundation. We have Gina Woodward, a parent and advocate of opioid abuse prevention. And Peggy Compton, who's the interim chair of Georgetown's Department of Nursing Practice and an expert in neuroscience, nursing, opioids, and addiction. So welcome everybody to the stage. And so we have a few questions that we'd like to sort of start out with you. The film, let me start with Mr. Maloney. The film sort of brings the case of how big of a problem this is. The number of people who are overdosing is huge, and yet it's not on the news. It doesn't seem to be getting the same kind of attention that the cocaine problem in the 80s got and other drug crises. Do you have some sense of why that is? Is it because these are legally prescribed drugs as opposed to things which are brought illicit to the market? Why is it that it's not in the public conscience?
Well, it's a great question, and obviously I won't get into the numbers, but it is staggering, 100,000 people over 4 years that you've lost, and then you have the countless family members that are devastated by that. I really don't know why, but I think more and more you see in the media a tremendous amount of attention on it, and that's kind of, I think, one of the best allies we have in this, getting the information out there. We try to do as much of that as we can, but I think the more the merrier as far as the attention.
All right. Lexi, you had a sort of a threefold connection with this problem. Your fiance, Steve, who unfortunately lost his battle with addiction, your own personal struggles, and then trying to keep your children and your daughter's age away from drugs. Can you share your story a little bit about your experience?
Sure. Thanks. Thanks for having me here. And first, I just have to say I feel really honored and privileged to sit up here today. Because of the number of people that die and struggle with this disease, it's just, I feel really like a walking miracle, and that I hope that people walk away today feeling like there is hope, because I am a person in long-term recovery from the disease of addiction, and it is possible to recover. There's 23 million Americans in recovery from the disease of addiction, and I want to point that out so that people can walk away feeling like it's possible. And then that said, I'm just so grateful for the people that were in the film, and thank you so much for the courage that it takes to participate in this, because it's difficult. So in 2011, my fiance Steve overdosed and died. He was legitimately prescribed opioids to treat his pain, and quickly became addicted to them, and went to treatment, got out of treatment, and 45 days later he died. For me, I was 45 days sober when he died. I do have a 13-year-old, and I work in a state in Minnesota, and I work in this field, and I know for a fact that we have 13-year-olds being admitted to treatment and dying every day across this country. You know, everybody did such a beautiful job talking about the numbers. Another thing that we could say to just kind of quantify it all is that the number of people that die per day is equivalent to a single-decker 747 crashing from the sky and everybody on that plane dying. That is what is happening in our country each and every day. So this kind of thing has to continue to happen so we can stop that.
Peggy, why are these drugs so addictive? And the film makes the case. People thought it wouldn't happen to me. I can take a couple of these. Why is it that it traps people?
These drugs, and that's a great question. Thank you for asking. I mean, there are all sorts of drugs of abuse, including alcohol, which kind of tickle the reward center and provide euphoria, and you can get high from that. And what happens neurobiologically is that after a while, these rewarding feelings start to take over motivational systems in the brain, so that, as people were saying in the film, they didn't care about anything else. Their only motivation was to get the next fix, the next drug supply. So that the disease of addiction itself is the type of disease which more and more of your coping responses, more and more of your social life really become just about the drug and the drug itself. One thing, though, about opioids, unlike other drugs of abuse, other than alcohol, is that opioids very quickly cause physical dependence and tolerance. So physical dependence means that if you take it away, you're going to go through withdrawal, which really is miserable. And then tolerance means that over time, you need more and more of the drug to get the same effect. Not all drugs of abuse have these two characteristics associated with it. So opioids are particularly addictive or particularly likely to lead to a substance use disorder because of the nature of those drugs and the fact that they are related to tolerance and physical dependence. So that does make opioids unique with respect to the drugs that we can become addicted to.
You know, your son became addicted and when he was 19 years old. Can you describe the path that he went through and as the addiction grew in him and your experience with that?
Tyler started with marijuana at age 12. It went from marijuana to pills. He had a back pain and he got some Vicodin, and then I took him to the doctor and he got Oxycontin. I didn't realize it then, and he went away from it, and it wasn't really a big deal. He always would tell me he was just self-medicating. I noticed in high school that his friends changed. People changed, places changed, his appearance changed, and I kind of lost control. I realized that this drug was more powerful than me. It was more powerful than our family. It was rapid. He started to go downhill. I think it was his senior year in high school that I started noticing I had surgery and pills started missing and became aware. And then I noticed that friends and behaviors. So things started escalating, and I had to take care of my 3-year-old that was in the house, and I had to put him out because it was bigger than me. I had lost control, and because of the crowds and the people that he was bringing in and around, and this is so hard. He was couch surfing. He was going from place to place, and he would call me telling me that my body hurts. He was in extraordinary pain, and I didn't understand. Mom, can you just give me a pill? I know you have something in your cabinet. I know you have something. And I did not realize that the pain medications and me taking him to a doctor, that it was just like giving him heroin. It was no different from injecting him with heroin. And unbeknownst and unknown to me, it led to his heroin abuse. He got a girl pregnant. They were using together. And it happened in less than a year. My son kept complaining of extraordinary pain. And I kept saying, you're gonna be fine, you're gonna be fine, you can get over it, take a Motrin. He said, you don't understand. I need something, I'm dope sick. I'm sweating, I have diarrhea, I'm sick, Mom, you need to help me. He'd lay across my bed begging me to help him. And I didn't know what to do. And it got so bad that he kept saying the week of and the day of, I can't take this pain anymore, I need to end this pain. I need to end this pain. And that night on August 19th, he ended the pain. He shot himself because he couldn't handle it anymore. And this is my son. I wear him every day.
You put a real human face on this disease and the problems and the challenges that it poses for people. Administrator, is there some sense that people follow a path of marijuana, or that there are gateway drugs that lead people down this? Are they, what have you guys found about, is there a path of marijuana leads to the pills, which then lead to heroin, or is there really no, everybody comes into it in a variety of different ways?
You know, I'd have to obviously defer to Peggy on that. I mean, we're law enforcement. It wouldn't be appropriate really for me to comment. We have our anecdotal experience with it, but I think an addiction specialist and a scientist would be much better suited to answer that.
And actually, the first gateway drug is usually alcohol. And alcohol use, especially at younger ages, because alcohol is available and it's legal. So frequently, the first gateway drug that people will get into is alcohol, and then that leads to marijuana, and then can lead to harder substances. But I think that does speak to the fact that alcohol use at an early age is a predictor. It's a risk factor for people developing more trouble. So sometimes we think about, adolescence and having a little bit of alcohol, but that really can be the gateway into enjoying psychoactive and euphorogenic effects. So we shouldn't take alcohol as lightly, perhaps, as we do, and I think we do need to consider it as a gateway drug.
Lexi, you've been active in advocating for increased access to Narcan, which helps in the effects of overdose. Can you talk about some of those efforts and why this is an important thing to do?
Absolutely, thanks. Well, first, I'm just so moved by this panel, and again, thank you for your courage to be here. And 1 in 10 people, if we look around the audience right now, 1 in 10 of you is going to have the disease of addiction. That's the facts. So you could just count off and divide the room, and that's who's going to have the disease of addiction in here. So, and we know this particular problem is really driven by an overprescribing, right? So that's the truth. We have created this problem. 3 out of 4 individuals who try heroin now have started with prescription pain pills. And 61% of all Americans who are overdosing and dying are doing so from opioids. And the vast majority of those are from prescription pain pills. So what I would propose, Narcan isn't adrenaline. What it is an antidote. You have to have it. If you have overdosed on an opioid, which is a heroin or a pain pill, same thing, you have to have the antidote to live. And so one thing that we could do across our country is just any time that a prescriber prescribes an opioid, a pain pill, co-prescribe the antidote, just like we do with diabetes. It's a no-brainer. But short of that, what we're seeing across our nation and what we work so hard to achieve is to get every state to have a 911 Good Samaritan plus naloxone law that provides a little bit of immunity for people who pick up the phone, who have the courage to pick up the phone to call for help, because 70–80% of the time drug users are using together. I certainly use together. And what we find is 99% of the time that person's found dead alone. Why? For fear of prosecution. So we need to put naloxone, otherwise known as Narcan, into the hands of every single citizen who is potentially in a situation to reverse an opioid overdose. And all of our first responders need to be carrying that tool. They're heroes. Let's give them the tools to be the heroes that they are. And then also provide some immunity, not for the drug lords that are bringing in, that are making a profit off of people's lives, but immunity for people who are using together, who are steeped in the disease of addiction, so that they actually pick up the phone and do the right thing.
So I was looking at some statistics that talked about the number of prescriptions that are being issued, and in some states there are more prescriptions being issued for Oxycontin and other opioids than there are people. In Alabama and various other states like that. What can we do about the overprescription problem in doctors? What strategies do you guys think about?
It's obviously the biggest issue. One of the initiatives that we obviously embrace in either diversion and also broader DEA, mandatory prescriber education, and events like this and the publicity about it are great. And the CDC coming out with the guidelines on prescribing. So you have doctors that need to be potentially educated, pharmacies that need to be educated about what red flags to look for a drug seeker to try to prevent that. So you have the whole education piece, you have the engagement with industry to our manufacturers to try to work with them on their regulatory controls. But then the other flip side of that is, and it was so well put, is to go after and investigate those that no matter how much prescriber education they get, they're choosing to do this and exploit human frailty for profit. So at the DEA, I know, we're focused on those doctors. We have a very big regulatory role and engagement to make sure that they're doing the right thing. And often the very mundane part of a regulatory investigation where we look at the record keeping will be an early warning system to say, okay, this doctor is either lax and therefore these drugs are being diverted, they're getting into somebody's medicine cabinet, they're being put out on the street, or they're intentionally doing this. And we need to focus on those and bring them to justice, obviously.
You know, so for a parent or a roommate or a friend, are there signals that somebody's getting in trouble? Are there warning signs? Are there things that we should be aware of? Were there any clues that, looking back, and hindsight's always better than living through it, but that are advice that you would give people to be aware of danger signals that your friends might be getting into trouble or their children might be getting into trouble?
I think one of the biggest things is to know the seriousness of a pill, that it is just like taking heroin. Know their friends, know who they're around. We had two people that we trusted in the family that were recovering. One had just got out of rehab and he reached out to my son and he had convinced me that he was helping Tyler. But he was really preying on Tyler's weakness and getting Tyler to get him to the drugs. And I was trusting him because he was writing to me, telling me, I'm helping him. I know he has this problem, I'm helping him. I have him with me tonight, so I felt safe. There was also a friend of that is an attorney that I held a lot of respect for, and he was a mentor in my son's life. And he made me believe that he was helping him, taking him in, talking to him. And after Tyler's passing, I got his cell phone only to find out that he was preying on my son and getting drugs and getting pills. And I could read things where Tyler was like, you're not helping me, I need help. And talking to your kids, make them put the cell phones down, make them have the TV off, and visitors, no visitors. Anytime I wanted to talk to Tyler, he had to have a friend. And I think that that's really critical. I would think that I was getting the message across to both, and really I needed to get the message across to him.
Are there things, rehab, we're saying we're putting more emphasis on prevention, more emphasis on rehab, but a lot of the stories are, I went to jail, and jails are notorious for not really doing a lot of rehab. Are there things we should be looking for or building in our public health systems or prison systems on rehab? Are there models that we should be pushing out?
Well, certainly, I think the idea of putting more treatment into the prisons is very, very important because, I kind of went back and forth when the individual made the comment about prison being the best thing that ever happened. Me, coming from a treatment perspective, would say, no, getting into treatment is the best thing that will happen. But again, prison can be a gateway to bring someone to their, to kind of their bottom, so to speak. But also, there are systems that have diversion programs. So if you're being convicted of a drug crime, you can have the choice to go into treatment. I know with alcoholics who get picked up for DWIs, they can, if they go to 12-step meetings, if they enter recovery, that there are ways that the criminal justice system, I think, is looking to better integrate treatment into the settings that they bring patients into or they bring people into. But I also want to make sure that we all understand that there are very, very effective treatments for the treatment of opioid dependence. And I think seeing a film like this really it can initiate that discussion. And there were some people in the film who said, once I got into treatment, things were better. But I think it's important to know that there are evidence-based treatments out there for opioid addiction, and there are places that you can go to get very good treatment. Part of that treatment can sometimes be medications. I think of Narcan as one of the best medications out there to treat acute opioid overdose. But there are other medications, ones known as buprenorphine or Subutex, that patients can come into treatment. They receive this opioid, which is a less potent opioid than heroin or some of the prescription opioids, but at least it covers the withdrawal. People are able to get stable. They can stay on this buprenorphine or Subutex for months until they really have their recovery in place. And then a third medication option that we've been looking more and more at is Narcan, but it's in a long-acting form, so that people can take a Narcan, an opioid antagonist, and take that every morning, and that if they try to get high, it won't work. So it's basically putting that blockade into your system to help you develop new behaviors around that. But if I can just say one more thing about treatment, medications are important and we have those out there, but addiction is a chronic relapsing disease. It looks more like diabetes than it does something that you could a broken leg. So anytime you have a chronic disease, recovery is something you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. We don't cure addiction. It's always kind of sitting there in the background. And so to the degree that these medications can be effective, they're not effective if we don't bring in the other tools to really help people deal with recovery. And so what that can mean is we get people on medication to stabilize them, but then we get them into therapy, and we get them into groups, and we get them doing cognitive behavioral sorts of interventions. So there are things that we can bring in to amplify what the medications can do. But what's nice about those medications is they can bring people into treatment and stabilize them. There's no more going through withdrawal. There's no more that need to spend your days finding drug. So it's a substitute that works and can be very effective with respect to getting people stable.
Alexia, do you have any advice for how people might get involved? Or, obviously there's thinking about your own family and your friend circle, but are there other things that people who have seen this movie, have been moved by these stories and touched by this problem that they could do, how they could help to be effective on a broader scale than just an individual scale? Again, both important, but do you have...
That's a really good question. I don't want to be self-promoting, but you can always call me. I have plenty of things we need people to do across this country, so I'm happy to connect with all of you and any of you that want to get involved. There's simple things that you can do. You can talk about the disease of addiction. When I was thinking about coming here today, I thought, wow, I feel a tremendous amount of fear, and I am a person in long-term recovery who is surrounded by support and love, and people think I'm a champion, and I get to do a lot of public speaking, and I often tell my story, and I often tell Steve's story, and yet there's always that little voice in the back of my head that thinks about, is somebody going to judge me because I was that person, that mother who in my kid's second grade classroom, I took opioids to go volunteer to read to second graders. Who does that? right? So there was that fear. So I think we as a country need to have that paradigm shift where we no longer treat the disease of addiction as a moral failing. It is not, it is a brain disorder. And it's really tough to get that because the reality is that there's some pretty bad behavior that goes along with this disease. And so that's a tough thing to handle versus diabetes, which is another incurable lifelong disease. So what can you do? You can talk about it. You can talk to your loved ones, to your neighbors about the disease of addiction. You certainly can ask your law enforcement and your fire department, are you guys carrying naloxone? Do you have the tools you need to be the heroes you are? You can do advocacy on the state, the local, and the federal level, which is really, you know, you are the expert. You are now the top expert in this field because you have lived it and you know what it is. So people often think that change happens in society from the top down. It does not. You all in the audience have power to make a difference, to change the direction, to stop this epidemic. But we have to stand up and be involved. It can't just come from the doctors or the DEA or the FBI or our legislators. We actually have to contribute and make it happen.
And if I could... And if I could just add to that, I think it's also important that we're knowledgeable consumers. So when we go get to have our wisdom teeth out, you know, doctor, why are you giving me a bottle of 30 pills? You know, could not 3 pills do it? So to the degree that patients can start to maybe question what's being prescribed to them, or if you have chronic pain, we know things like acupuncture work better than opioids, or physical therapy or occupational therapy. So to kind of challenge the clinician or the physician when what they want to hand you is a prescription. You know, what can you as a patient do to change that physician's behavior, that prescriber's behavior?
That's our last word. I want to thank our panelists. Would you join me in thanking them for their incredible performance?